Next, from Chicago, Governor Rauner is joined by Representatives Kwame Raoul and Mary Flowers, among others, as they urge bipartisan action to reduce criminal recidivism. This runs about 30 minutes.
Good afternoon. I'm Pam Rodriguez, President and CEO of TASC, Treatment Alternatives for Safe Communities. I want to welcome you all here. I want to welcome our very distinguished guests, who you'll be hearing from in a minute. I just want to say one thing about TASC, for those of you who don't know. For the last 40 years, we've been working at the intersection of criminal justice and behavioral health with a focus on increasing rehabilitation for people who get involved in the justice system, recovery, and reducing recidivism at the same time. And that's a part of what we're talking about here today. I'm also a member of the commission, and we are honored to be hosting a commission meeting downstairs right after this event. Now, I want to especially thank Governor Rauner for being here and choosing this location as a site for this press conference. And without further ado, Benita.
Hello, good morning. My name is Benita. First of all, I want to thank the governor. I want to thank the governor for giving people an opportunity that's coming from incarceration to have a state ID. It is very important that you have a state ID in order to get a job, in order to get a place to stay. And in order to do that, it's a great thing. And I also want to thank Miss Nellie because she's the one who helped me get mine. I'm at a place called A Safe Haven. It helps you transpire, it helps you sustain the society. And this will be a great thing because it's hard out there to get a state ID when you coming from being in incarceration from having nothing. And it's a great thing, and I want to thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm State Representative Mary Flowers, and I'm the sponsor of House Bill 3368, one of the sponsors. And I'm looking forward to working with the governor and others on this bill. As it was stated, that having a state ID is very important, but as this current bill is written, it is flawed because it says upon the release of the person, that person will have a state ID. And so that we're given the impression that the Secretary of State's office is inside the prison or the juvenile center taking the pictures, and that's not so. So that's one part of it that needs to be corrected. And the other portion of the bill speaks to, my memory is fading me now, but there's a couple flaws in the bill that needs to be corrected. And I want to thank the governor for bringing this to our attention. I want to thank the governor for putting forth the commission. And I believe that we should also have a time certain when people are incarcerated before they are released, that they should have their state ID. They should have their Medicaid card. And right now, current law says that they should have a Medicaid card, and that's not being done. So we have to make sure that when we pass this legislation, that it is being implemented. So there's a couple things that we need to do to make sure that we pass the bill, making sure that everyone have a state ID, number one, make sure they have their Medicaid card, number two, before they are released. Thank you.
Well, it's always something following Representative Flowers. I don't know how to follow, but I too want to thank the governor, and not just on this bill, but on tackling, on helping lead us on tackling kind of age-old obstacles. Some of them very simple obstacles to people who have paid their debt to try to make a better life for themselves. And obtaining an ID, which is something that seems so fundamental, is something that has been an obstacle for a long time. We've got much more work to do on creating pathways to returning to good citizenship, and we're working away at that work. In fact, we'll continue working after this conference today in this building today as the Criminal Justice Reform Commission that the governor created days after he came into office. I recall a conversation I had with the governor just days after he was elected, and we had a good conversation about criminal justice reform and how we could work in a bipartisan manner at tackling some of the issues, and we've been doing so. It's not easy work. It's not easy work figuring it all out and tackling the politics that will sometimes stand in the way, but Governor Rauner is taking it on, and I'm glad to be his partner in it. Governor Rauner.
Yes. My name is Kirkland Atkins. I'm just grateful to have a place like Safe Haven to go to get my ID, help me to get it. And coming out of the criminal justice system is hard. It's like obstacles that you have to go through to get it. Sometimes they want you to get a DNA, transcripts from schools, and back in the day, sometimes they don't have that. So I'm thankful for this program they're having. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you again to everybody for joining us today. This is an important day, step in a process. I would like to give special thanks to Representative Flowers and to Senator Raoul for their leadership around justice reform and sentencing reform for the state of Illinois. They have been strong proponents for a more fair, equitable system that actually helps people lead productive lives and keep our citizens, our families safe while doing it. I want to thank them very strongly. It was an honor for me, in conjunction with them and others, to form a commission on criminal justice and sentencing reform. That commission has met, I think, about 20 times now. They're meeting again this afternoon. They came out with their first round of recommendations at the end of last year. They're going to come out with another round of recommendations at the end of this year. And this is a process to improve our system so it produces better results for the people of Illinois. The goal is keep people safer, reduce overall crime, punish violent offenders in an appropriate way, but make sure we're not only about punishment, that we are about second chances, we are about reducing repeat offenses, reduce recidivism, and we help those who paid their debt to society come back and lead productive lives. They get help with mental health treatment, get help with job training, get help with addiction recovery. Without those services, the odds are repeat offenses will occur. We need to change our system. It can not only focus on punishment, it needs to also involve rehabilitation. And that's what this is really about. This particular bill, very important. The legislature has introduced, I believe, 4 bills coming out of the recommendations of the Commission on Justice Reform. This one bill in particular is very important. It has passed the Senate unanimously. Let me repeat that. It has passed the Senate unanimously, but it has been held up in the House Rules Committee. When I am here today, and all of us are here asking that the House pass this bill as soon as possible. It is so hard for folks coming out of prison to get reestablished as productive citizens. It has challenges, tremendous challenges. One challenge we can knock down and put away so it's not a challenge anymore is the ability to have an ID. An ID is necessary to try to get an apartment lease, to try to set up a bank account or get a credit application, for a job application, for health care treatment. You need an ID. And right now, the way it's set up in Illinois, very difficult for an offender who's leaving prison to get an ID. This shouldn't be the case. And this bill allows the Secretary of State, as a Secretary of State, work with the Department of Corrections to make sure everybody coming out of prison has an ID for 90 days, lets them get established, and then sets them up to get a permanent long-term ID while they can get themselves established in the rest of their lives. So they can work on jobs, work on health care, work on a place to live, and stay in all the essentials of life. This bill is very important. It should have passed the House already, and we're asking as soon as the General Assembly comes back that the House would pass this bill. And again, we want to continue the process of trying to improve our justice system, reduce the overall prison population, give second chances and more rehabilitation for nonviolent offenders who need help with their addiction, mental health issues, et cetera. This is a great step in that direction. I'd like to thank everyone here for their work in this effort, and we'll continue the effort going forward on a bipartisan basis. Any questions?
So why hasn't it? I mean, it went to House Rules like 5 months ago or something. Why hasn't it gone anywhere?
I don't know the answer. I don't know, Mary, do you have a comment?
Well, again, It was after we reviewed the bill, and it was after session. Unfortunately, there was a lot of things going on with the governor's office and the speaker's office at the end of session. So this one just kind of got under the radar a little bit. But in the meantime, if you review the bill, you'll see that there's a couple technicalities that needs to be addressed in the bill, because current law says if a person is getting out of jail, the first thing they have to do is go and get their school record. But even if you got your school record, you would need an ID. And I want to say that this is not the first time this bill has been passed. I think it was in 2010, this bill passed once before, but the ID that's given by the Department of Correction is not recognized at the other state facilities as a state ID. So that's a problem. So we have to figure out how. And it shouldn't really be a problem because the Secretary of State's office is mobile and it can come to the Department of Corrections or the Juvenile Center. And we just have to have a date certain. That's the reason why we need to have a plan in place in regards to, we know when these people are going to be let out of these facilities. So if it's 6 months prior, we start making a plan as far as their release out of the institution and their re-entry into the community. And they will need the necessary papers for their medical records and their ID.
Representative, what is the approximate universe of men and women every year who are released and need this?
Oh, whatever the population is of people being released, and I have no idea what that may be, but each and every last one of them, because of what may have happened, their homes or their families may have moved, or they may have lost their paperwork because of the length of time that they've been incarcerated. But this is the state of Illinois. And so while they're incarcerated, you know exactly who they are because you have their fingerprints and you have their ID. We can help them. If we want to help them to become responsible citizens upon their release, we can help them get their birth certificates. We can help them to get their medical records, their ID, whatever it is, while they are there. And then upon their release, they could take that ID and go and apply for a job, go and apply for housing.
What you're saying is one big chunk of state government isn't communicating well with another big chunk of state government. You got the Department of Corrections and the Secretary of State's office.
And the Department of Human Services, absolutely, to deal with Medicaid, absolutely. And so, again, that's the reason why there needs to be a plan and process, and I hope that's a part of the Governor's Commission to put forth a plan for the inmates that we know are going to be released from these institutions and to make sure that they have a proper place.
So three-part question for you and Senator Raul and Governor Rauner. Three parts.
Which part do we each get?
You'll see. You're a smart guy. So, you know, our president said a long time ago, the first urgency of now. You've just been asked about sort of what's the universe. I think there are like 50,000 prisoners in Illinois ballpark. You folks would know better. My guess is in the next few months, 500 of those folks might be coming out, being released. I mean, you got a lot of talent. Senator Raul could fix this bill and write it, I'm sure, today in 2 hours. He's a great lawyer. You're a great politician. You got a great governor. I'm in a good mood of giving out compliments to him. So, seriously, you got 500 people who are going to be probably affected in the next few months. Why doesn't the governor call a special session? Sit down in the next week, get a bill that corrects as best as you can all these things, and then give it a shot. There will be some things wrong, but a good chunk of those 500 people will be so much better off because they will have ID. So the sense is, being somewhat cynical, I hear Speaker Madigan may not want to give another feather in his hat, or let Governor Rauner have another feather in his hat. So hold this up for the election, or else the governor and the senator and you can go around the state saying, look what we did, and the speaker doesn't want that to happen. Am I being too cynical? No.
You are really, because we have worked on many of bills as far as early release and doing the right thing. As I said before, we've passed this legislation. Let me explain. We've passed legislation in regards to ID. The Secretary of State's office did not give the state ID that the average John or Jane Doe would get if they lost their ID. Because the argument that I was given, they cannot authenticate who they say that they are because so many former inmates had previous aliases. But the fact of the matter is that you can prove who they are because you have their fingerprints and you have their identification for however long they may have been incarcerated. They could have done a background check on that. After all, they've had them for a time certain. We have passed legislation to deal with Medicaid. The federal law does not allow you to collect Medicaid or have Medicaid while you are incarcerated. But upon your release, we've made it so that you can get a Medicaid card or an application. That's not being done. That is already the law. So my point to you is not about a power struggle between the speaker and the governor. That's not it. The fact of the matter is the powers to be that we have to get these state agencies together. The Secretary of State office is not housed in the Department of Correction. So somehow, some way, the Secretary of State is going to have to set up a place or a site to come to the Department of Correction, or the Department of Correction will have to set up for a time certain for the people that's going to be released to go to the Secretary of State's office to take this ID. That's all it is.
Senator Rail, your chamber passed it. Could you just step up now and just tell me, could you get this done? Could you get a bill that's good, remedies all the things that Representative Flowers said? You could probably do it in the next 2 hours, seriously. And the governor could call the session and you could get it done this week. So the two of you, could you get it done?
Jeff, you overrate my intelligence.
I understand.
You know, I've been in the legislature for the last 11 years. There's always been bills that are pending in one chamber or the other at the end of a session. The thing is, we're here today coming together saying that this is an initiative that we support on a bipartisan basis. The notion of calling a special session for this, I think there are tons of bills that are incomplete at the end of each session. If the governor were to call a special session for each one of those issues that are important issues, then we'd be spending a lot of taxpayer money unnecessary. I understand. Jeff, I understand. I've been advocating for some policy changes for years, right? So not just the last few months, for years. We're beginning to work on it on a bipartisan basis, and we're going to continue that work. But the notion of every time there's an unfinished issue, we're going to call for a special session, I think that's ridiculous.
And I just want to say this, I cannot thank the governor enough. Mr. Governor, thank you very much. I appreciate the commission, I appreciate your involvement, we work together. This is a bipartisan issue. There's no one playing games with people's lives here. I have a personal stake here because the people that's released usually come back to my community. I want them to have their driver's license. I want them to have their state ID. I want them to have access to job, education, and opportunities. Believe me, I'll leave no stone unturned to make sure that this gets done during the veto session.
Governor, could this be possibly more important than some of the other bills that didn't get done? So, Senator Rawls says you can't do it for everyone, I understand. Maybe this one, demonstrate what you can do as a governor, your leadership to get this done in the next week.
This is a very important bill. There are many important bills. Again, I applaud the representative and Senator Raul for their leadership on this. My understanding is that this bill has corrected, because there was an effort to do this, I think 4 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that. And technically, the Secretary of State's office wasn't willing to take the ID generated by the Department of Corrections because it didn't have the right address or a good address to be used. I would have liked to have that be corrected just by good administration process, but it didn't get corrected, and the Secretary of State's office just didn't get them IDs. This bill corrects that, requires it, and I believe it's technically now compliant with everything. I think it's a good bill, as far as my understanding.
Well,
if there's some other issue, so be it. It's important, I hope, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to gather today. We want to encourage, there's going to be a lot on people's plates when the session, when the General Assembly comes back after the election, and I think we all are making the request, let's make sure this bill passes when they come back.
Governor, if you say this is a good bill now, does that mean you'd be happy if it passed the way it is now?
I would.
Does it have to be amended as Representative Flowers says?
I don't know, Mary and I haven't discussed that. My understanding is what the Senate passed is good as it is, but.
And I just want to say, and this, the current bill reads, upon release of the person from the center, they will be given their state ID. That can't happen. Also, the current bill does not say that the person have to apply for their ID. Those are two things that has to be addressed in this legislation.
So those are amendments that have to take place?
Yes, those are two things.
That's the homework
Upon
for Senator
release, if you stepped out of jail right now, I'm supposed to, according to the legislation, I'm supposed to give you a state ID. I can't do that. You have not applied, number one, and the Secretary of State's office have not taken your picture and given you.
They can't just come over and do it on their own. They need a bill that says how to do this.
Well,
Secretary of State, Jesse Baker, Jesse.
I would imagine that there should be a law that would require or have access for the Secretary of State's office to come into the Department of Correction or the Department of Correction to go to take, because they're still inmates at the time.
Jesse's been there for 20 years.
And he's been there longer than 20 years, because I've been there for 30 years.
All right, let's, yeah. We're gonna do off topic over here, but anything related to criminal justice reform, let's talk about here.
Governor, Representative Bradley attacked.
We're gonna do off topic off to the side.
This is,
Well, this is criminal justice. That's criminal justice.
So, I mean, that was a direct attack on what you're trying to do here and what your commission is doing. What do you say to that and other law and order?
Politics and campaigning is its own process. It's its own, I'm not really going to comment on campaigns. There is a strong bipartisan effort in Illinois to improve our criminal justice system and make it more fair and make it more balanced and give those who deserve a second chance a real opportunity for a second chance.
But he's not alone. There's a backlash against some of these reform efforts. How do you overcome that?
I think there's bipartisan, strong agreement that we need to improve our system, that our system's not working, and it needs to be reformed. And that's what all our elected officials are concentrating on through this commission to try to bring about improvements in the system.
Any other topics?
Governor, you mentioned adequately punishing violent offenders as far as criminal justice. We hear from the mayor and police all the time here that needs to be strengthened in terms of sentencing and also gun control. Is that part of your criminal justice reform?
Well, again, maybe Senator Rowe might want to comment. There are some efforts around to maybe try to strengthen certain gun-related crimes. I'm certainly a believer that violent offenders should be punished and kept away from innocent people. I believe the senator has been working on legislation for a time. I don't know if Senator would like to comment.
Sure. And a comment to a previous question, I think we need your help too, right? So it's, I think we're all in this together with regards to moving criminal justice reform forward, but I think we need the help of journalists to write that these policies are strong policies. So notwithstanding what happens in politics, we overcome that because good policy should move forward, notwithstanding what happens in campaigns. With regards to the gun violence we're experiencing, we're examining data currently to make sure that that our response is one that is consistent with the data on current sentencing. What we're exploring is not changing the parameters of the sentences that currently exist. So previous proposals sought to just bump up the minimums on all of the gun possession offenses and add a layer of truth in sentencing on top of that. We're not suggesting to do that at all. We're looking at the existing sentencing ranges and trying to explore the idea of providing presumptive guidelines to judges when faced with a repeat gun offender. So,
apropos of gun violence, we've been told that we can stop it in a week if we started stop and frisk. Good idea, bad idea?
Well, consider your source.
What's your view of that?
I think it's an application as we've seen it in other places. It's been unconstitutionally applied, where you're stopping. I think the statistics of the returns on the number of people stopped, as well as the disproportionate impact on African American males in particular. I think that's not the country that we're supposed to live in. You know, that I could be walking down the street in blue jeans and a baseball cap and be subjected to something that somebody else of another hue in the same attire would not be. That's unconstitutional.
Bill started the stop and frisk, as you may know, in the 90s under Giuliani. It worked very effectively there. He brought it out to Los Angeles. It worked very effectively.
I don't care if Martin Luther King started stop and frisk. I don't care if Martin Luther King would have started.
Empirical data that shows it works very effectively. You might want to look at Heather McDonald's new book called The War on Cops, and not dismiss these things so easily as unconstitutional. There was a district court judge who upheld.
You and I can look at that as sometimes.
I mean, it's not quite as straightforward as you, and I know you're smarter than that. It's not quite as straightforward.
I appreciate your compliments.
Do we have any other on-title questions? All right, we'll do off-topic after the set. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.